it is agreed that the said tribes of Indians shall not be hindered from but have free liberty of hunting and fishing as usual. And if they think that a truck house needs to be built on River Shubenacadie or any other place of their resort, that includes here, Habino, or anywhere in what we call present-day Maritimes, it's actually Mi'kma'ki, still ours, okay?
In any town.
And they shall have to dispose, and to be exchanged for what the Indians shall have to dispose of, and that in the meantime, the Indians shall have free liberty to bring to sale. It does not say barter and trade, or give it away, or anything of the same. Sale, S-A-L-E. For commerce to take place, there's the inherent right to sell. If you got goods to trade, that idea is you can sell your goods.
You have a constitutional right to sell it.
Yes, there you go. Be the sale- the Halifax or any other settlement within this province. Now, when this was written, Nova Scotia included New Brunswick and PEI. So it also applies here. Skins, feathers, fowl, fish, or any other thing. That encompasses mining, wood, etc., logging. All this falls under the clause of every other thing. They shall have to sell. Again, they're reinforcing the idea of sell. There they shall have free liberty to dispose of, therefore, to the best advantage. Not at a bargain basement rate. Not for you to give it away or have it stolen. To the best advantage does not include having people harassed and losing their traps and being denied a right to livelihood. Not being denied a right to thrive and bring comfort to their people, to our people. We have the right. In fact, before Europeans came here, we occupied all of what we call Mi'kma'ki. All the fish was ours, all the wood was ours, all the land, all the minerals, etc. was ours. We were the Irvings, we were the Kennedys, we were the Rothschilds. We weren't poor. Being poor was imposed on us when they took our resources, when they killed us off to the point of where we were almost extinct. That's when we became poor. That's when they created the reserve system. Think about that for a moment. The reserve is what?
Jail.
It's a peace, it is a prison without bars.
Yep.
When they put us on reserves, they created concentration camps.
Exactly.
So that's where many people reside today. When I was asked by a game warden, which reserve, where are you from? I said, I'm from prisoner of war camp number 11. You know this Paddle First Nation. Now that's a fact. If you're from a reserve, you're from a prisoner of war camp.
Except they didn't win a war.
Still fighting, we're still in it.
Yeah.
Now, that's what I just wanted to touch on with the Treaty of 1752. What I have here before me now is a ruling by, it's a Court of Appeal of New Brunswick, with Dale Sapir and Clark Poulters as the respondents. I want you to, I know you can't see it from way in the back, but I'll tell you what this is. It's not a Canadian flag, and it's not a maritime flag. It's a crown.
British.
It's a crown.
Brown, yeah.
Okay? What does that mean? When I go to court and I was charged for logging and fishing, etc., it says Nicolas Prisk versus, at that time, Her Majesty the Queen. Today it's King Charles versus Her Majesty the Queen in the right of Canada. Did not say in the privilege of Canada. We sign treaties with sovereignty. We are sovereign. If you look at the Buffalo Jump of 1985, Brian Maroney asked us to sign away our pre-existing sovereign status. How can you give something away that you don't already have? Stephen Harper, in his termination policy, asked us to sign away our pre-existing sovereign status. Think about the position that you're in now as descendants of sovereign status. I brought this up to DNR officers and they couldn't get away from me fast enough. When I did my logging case, that was my first time I was criminally charged for anything. That was a little over 20 years ago. I fought that case almost 7 years. They put a stay of proceedings on. Within a year, somebody stole some of that wood. I caught the guy who did it. I'm driving by his house. I looked, I see the wood in his backyard. So instead of taking the law into my own hands, I called the RCMP. From where the RCMP was to where this guy lived, maybe 15, 20-minute drive. It took the RCMP 10 days to get there. So I was at a meeting in down by Fredericton area, or Muktu, I believe, and I got a call from the RCMP. They said, "We got him." "You didn't get him, I gave him to you." He said, "Well, I'm here with a range, one of the DNR officers. The guy confessed. We got pictures of the wood, but we're going to ask him not to return it today, because it's 85, 90 degrees out, so we're going to give him a week to put it back." I said, "Did you charge him?" "No." "Why not?" You ready for this? Not enough evidence to get a conviction. I'm like, I thought he was joking. I said, "Are you serious?" He goes, "Yes." I said, "What does it take for an Indian, for somebody to be charged if they commit a crime against a native?" He said, "I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to give it a number to my superior officer. Take it up with him."
Wow.
I'm like, is this for real? So I waited a few days. I called the guy up. He said, "Well, Mr. Prisk, I have to look at the file, and then I'll get back to you." Within a week, he called me back. He told me the same crap. So I had been to police academy to be a fishery guardian back in '93. I knew this was a summary conviction. I had 6 months. On the last day, I went to court and I put a personal prosecution against the guy who stole my wood. So the judge said, "Mr. Prisk, bring in your evidence, your witnesses, next Tuesday. And if there's enough evidence, we'll proceed with charges." So I subpoenaed the DNR officer, the RCMP. We go to court. They brought in 2 prosecutors from Fredericton. Their argument was, since there was a stay of proceedings, the wood belonged to the Crown, it didn't belong to me. So how could I charge you for stealing something that doesn't belong to me? So I countered with, doesn't matter if the wood belongs to me, to Pabina, or to the Crown. It doesn't belong to the guy who stole it.
Yeah.
Judge agreed with me, said, "Mr. Prisk, you're absolutely right. There's ample evidence here to proceed with charges, but you're going to have to do the work." So I did. I filled out all the papers, had the guy charged to give me a court date, December 17th. On the night of the 16th, we had a snowstorm. Court was closed that morning. So I go to court in the afternoon. I brought the issue up. The judge looked at the paper and he says, "Mr. Prisk, everything's in order, but the guy had a valid reason for not being here. We were closed this morning. So what you're gonna have to do is I'm gonna give you a new court date, February 4th, and you're gonna have to do all this paperwork over again." So we're coming on Christmas. I said, "Well, I'll wait till after the holidays and I'll do the paperwork." So meanwhile, at that time I was working addictions, and one of my clients had to go to court and didn't want to go to court on that day. So, instead of being in court 20 after 9, we show up in court quarter after 10. Somebody that knew me came over and said, "Nick, your case was called up." I go, "Can't be, I didn't even do the paperwork yet." He goes, "Seriously, your case was called up?" So at break, I went to the prosecutor and I said, "Hey, my buddy back there says you called up my case for logging." "Oh yes," he said, "we had a lawyer from Hamilton come down and represent you. And we put a stay of proceedings on." And I'm like, "Why?" First of all, I'm not paying him, you hired him, you pay him. And he sort of looked at me with, you know, I said it kind of sarcastically. Not that I'm ever sarcastic, mind you. I said, "Well," he said, "No, Mr. Prisk, there's no argument." He said, "We just do this and we'll send you the paperwork when we get around to it." So I went to see the clerk. She basically told me the same thing. So I said to the clerk, "You know, we have treaties, and the treaties of 1760-61 state that if a native is molested his hunting, fishing, and gathering rights, the long arm of the law is going to come down on the perpetrator. That's never been rescinded. Predates any laws, provincial laws, and legislation to the contrary." And she's going like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." She said, "Could I have a few minutes?" She ran back to see the judge. They came over with my entire case file. "Here you are, Mr. Prisk, with the judge's most sincere apologies, but the ruling has been made, we can't change it." I said, "Okay, we'll be in court again." I get charged. They dropped the charges. I got charged for fishing in Miramichi with a friend of mine. I did the fishing. He was just with me because I have a bad heart. I went through open heart surgery. I'm a diabetic, and I don't go in the woods by myself. I gotta have somebody with me. So what happened was they charged me for fishing in closed Crown Reserve waters. And he charged my buddy. Well, he ended up dropping charges with him. And after 6 months, I called him up. I said, "You know, that was just a summary conviction. I want all my stuff back." "Oh, Mr. Prisk," he said, "we got a different charge on you." Now, this is after 6 months. He said, "We have the charges, well, we'll tell you in February when we give you the papers." Not February, I mean January. This isn't December. So what happens in January, they come to me and say, "You're charged with giving false and misleading information to a fishery officer." It's okay. That May, we get a call from the prosecutor in Fredericton dropping all charges. So I said to him, "Well, could you fax me a letter to that effect?" And he did. We were supposed to go to court July 21st and 22nd. So my friend and I went to court, and we had asked the judge if they could put all this in one day. They said yes. So they dropped all the charges. They delivered all my gear from Miramichi back to Pabineau. So what happened was, I asked the judge about a lawsuit. I said, "You're supposed to bring everything back in the same condition you took it in." "Well, my trout, you had it for 14 months in the freezer. I'm sure it's freezer burned. When you took them, they were fresh. So I want you guys to go get some fresh trout and bring them back to me." They said, "Sorry, Mr. Prisk, we can't do that, but we can go to Sobeys and get you some trout." So I said, "No, not good enough. I'm going to go with the lawsuit." I said, "You know, if a non-native person was fishing and you catch him and he's convicted, it's $150 to $200 a trout. That's the fine. That's what I want in return." He said, "Well, you got to go to a different court." What happens, COVID sets in. A lot of time expired, so I said, no, I'm not gonna let that go. I'll be in court again. So meanwhile, when I was in Miramichi, when I got charged, DNR wanted to charge us, he asked me for my status card. I was a little, wasn't as knowledgeable as I am today about that, so I said, okay. I give him my status card. They took down the information, and there was like 5 or 6 of them, and I said, listen, I want something from you guys. They said, what? I said, I want to see your National Canadian Identification Card. You want a card from me that says I'm Indian? I want a card from you that says you're Canadian.
Yeah.
Did you get it?
So, what did he do? They charged us, arrested us, then they give me back all my stuff. With a receipt and everything, I signed it and he got it all back. 2 minutes later, the ranger gets a phone call, then he seizes everything again. About 45 minutes later, he comes back, gives me half my stuff. So when all this stuff got dropped, they end up delivering all the rest of my stuff back to Pavido. So this is kind of harassment that we face. But I stand up and I fight absolutely each and every time, and if you do that as well, every time you're charged, you stand up and you fight. Know your treaties.
Go to trial every time.
Right?
Every time.
You know your
trial.
treaties, you got a solid foundation.
If I'm around, I'll give you a hand.
And I appreciate men like Mr. Riley and now Mr. Marshall. We just met for the first time. But the amazing thing is, a lot of people don't realize, is when we look at, and I just want to go through something briefly here, and I'll close with that. This is my old status card from probably back in the 80s. That's my racist card,
Yeah.
right?
Expired?
Well,
Yeah.
Is it
speaking of race,
expired like mine?
I call all white people now Caucasoids. Call them Caucasoids. They identify us as Indian, you identify them as Caucasoids.
I want to talk to you a little bit about what I have here of freedoms and liberties. And just I'll close with this. The revelations in culture that have taken place in the vocabularies of technology, psychology, medicine, politics, and law. It is possible for the modern day judges and political policymakers to use the terminology of historical treaties and other historical documents to be redesigned to a legal framework of their own making and to their own liking, but almost always at direct variance with the historically accepted meaning of the terms. Let me give you an example. You go to court and the lawyer says to the judge, Your Honor, my client is guilty. But he's guilty of stealing $5. When he really means he's guilty of stealing $5 more or less than $20,000. Different story. So words in their context do mean just what they say. Now either we're willing to admit to this or we must forego all scholastic progress and go back to writing on cave walls with charcoal sticks in the tradition of our alleged Stone Age ancestors. Then I'd like to quote Professor Roland Chris John on manufacturing consent. And this you'll encounter when you go to court every time. The idea that in a democracy where you can't actually beat people into submission and get away with it, people have to be persuaded to do the wrong thing. That the consent to go in a particular direction that power wants you to go as a matter of rhetoric. Then rather than one of, well, we're going to let insightful, thoughtful, deep-thinking population make up its own mind, and that's the direction you will go in. No. If you are in power, you don't want people making up their own minds. You want you making up their mind. So you have to manufacture that consent. It's the end quote.
He's a good friend of mine.
He is, yeah.
I used to play chess with him.
Really, you're a chess player?
Yeah.
Me too. Anyway, now, I'm just going to, one brief thing and I'll be done because we have to go. The right to consent. One of our rights being breached is the right to consent. Native people have not consented to our lands and resources and our identities being stolen. In the beginning, they used termination policies like a gun and a bullet. Today, they use assimilation policies, trying to change us into white facsimiles. Reserves are concentration camps. They are prisons without bars. I can be anything I want to be in Mi'kmaq, except Mi'kmaq. We were forced into these prison camps by destroying our food supply and our right to passage in our own land. And with that, I'd like to say thank you for your time. We're all in.
Thanks, Nick.
And there's much more to be said.